You're listening to a podcast from I'dRatherBeWriting.com. My name is Tom Johnson. Today, I am talking with Adam Altman, founder of Redocly. He's based in Austin. And Adam, can you introduce yourself a little bit? Tell the listeners who you are and what you do.
Sure. So I'm Adam. Thanks, Tom, for having me on. And I am the CEO and founder of Redocly. I have been an entrepreneur most of my life, most of my career. And yeah, that's what I do. I spend my day leading Redocly, hopefully into the future.
Cool. Yeah, I've really been a fan of Redocly in just the API doc space. The outputs are like a level above in terms of like usability and presentation, navigability, and everything. Can you tell us a little bit about Redocly, why you started the company, a little bit about its history?
Yeah. So it I didn't even want to start Redocly, but the way it started out was I had started another company, Rebilly. It's a payment orchestration platform. And a few years into our journey, I had come across Swagger, which is now known as OpenAPI, a specification, and it had a promise to be able to power different parts of the API lifecycle, including generating code, mocks, and docs, amongst other things. And since docs were the most visible of those things and the most in demand that we needed at Rebilly, I we tried to fire up the tools that existed, and it didn't work for us. So I had assumed that we just didn't know what we were doing. We had never used Swagger before, so we thought we just described our API incorrectly. And I found an expert who told us, actually, you described it correctly, but this tools don't handle your use case. And I thought, oh, is our use case really that unusual? Did we do this bad of a job designing our API? The answer is probably yes, but the reality is that there are a lot of use cases that the predominant tools at that time didn't support. After looking for other products for a couple months and not being able to find anything, we decided to create Redoc, which is really just short for Rebilly documentation. And on a whim, we decided to make it open source. And that kind of started the history of Redocly.
Wow, that's really interesting. I didn't know that like the Rebilly was a payment orchestration company that you also founded and that you switched like entire almost like companies into the API tool space from your previous one. That's pretty cool. And yeah, that history is kind of fascinating. You developed the tool out of a clear need and a gap in the market. For your own use case, and then open sourced and developed other products. You mentioned the open source part, but
Mhm.
can you explain a little bit about like what are the products that Redocly provides? We've got Redocly, and so on. Can you just kind of lay out the main things
Yeah,
that users might use?
Yeah, so Redoc, just to make it more clear, it renders an open API or Swagger definition. So you feed it a document, and it will output HTML, CSS, and JavaScript and make it look readable and good. Uh, we do a pretty good job at that. Of course, we always think we can do better, which is probably why you enjoy our uh, usability and user interface, because we don't. So we're constantly trying to figure out how to make it better. And the so that's like our core or original product. And as when we started Redocly, we decided to expand and build a developer portal. The difference being that Redoc, it renders an open API description. So it's pure reference information. And there's more content that you need to help communicate APIs. So you might need to tell someone what your API is about, or how to sign up, how to purchase it. You might need to help them troubleshoot common uses, or even just describe common use cases. And so that sort of set of contextual documentation that's relatively important to developers who are trying to determine, is this what I need? And does this thing work? And will it work for me? It expands beyond what's in an Open API definition. So Open API is limited, and that's a good thing. It's already complex enough. So, uh, but so we created this portal to be able to marry these things together, so that you could blend reference with other types of contextual docs, whether it's conceptual docs or guides, and uh, but going beyond that, a lot of companies organize their APIs differently, so they might maintain multiple Open API uh, documents. They might be organized by teams or microservices or things like that. And that's what we call an API catalog. So it was important for us to have this API catalog concept in a developer portal. So these are the two main products that we have today. We do have an open source, another open source project called Redocly CLI, and it has a variety of Open API related tools. So it has a command, preview docs, which if you run Redocly, if you install Redocly CLI and you run Redocly preview docs, and then you pass it some Open API file, it will start on your local host a preview of those docs, so you can see basically what Redoc or Redocly is doing behind the uh, scenes, and just do it on your local computer. But that CLI tool has a lot of other commands, and one of the commands we've been focusing on in the most recent years is the lint command and the bundle command. These commands, the lint command can enforce a set of rules to ensure that what you've got is actually compliant with the Open API spec, but going above and beyond that to enforce design standards in your Open API definition.
Cool. So just to summarize, the redoc is more of the API reference generator part, and that's the open source component. Redocly is the whole developer portal that integrates both the non-reference content and reference content into like one experience, and that's the premium offering, right?
Yeah.
And then the CLI is a tool for working with the API for validating and bundling and doing other things.
Yeah, exactly.
Now, I played around with Redocly's tools a bit, and they're definitely unique. Some other API providers take more of a visual experience, trying to give you like a WYSIWYG editor almost for the API. Yours is more targeted to more of a code or Docs as code experience. Can you talk a little bit about what makes Redocly unique from other API solutions?
Yeah, I think we look at the problem differently from many other uh, people in the industry. So we approached it from the perspective of, how can we not leave the tools that we're using and accomplish this? So how can we not, have yet another tool to install? And we thought about how would we want this to work, and we landed on what is known as docs like code. And we didn't know it at that time, but we found out, oh, this is actually a thing. And people treat their documentation like they treat their code. So they store it in source control, and you can put in place kind of good practices like you would with your code, like enforcing reviews and uh, builds, having successful builds before some docs get shipped. So when we saw this, we realized that this is better for us to embrace. We are focused on building really rich visual experiences for the consumer. And uh, in order to do that, we have to prioritize. So we could decide, do we want to prioritize the uh, producer of the APIs? Now, the producer are the people that pay us. So, maybe I should be quiet here when I say we don't prioritize their experience, but we prioritize the consumer's experience. And we feel that this will work out well for us in the long run because the consumers pay the producers and the producers ultimately pay us. So if we can get that to work for them, uh, hopefully they will bear with us until we uh, build a better producer experience.
Now, when you say that you wanted to allow the people who are creating the API to stay within their own tools and environment,
Mhm.
does that mean that you're kind of targeting developers as the core audience, or are you also including like other roles? I mean, tech writers versus I don't know, other sort of roles that are working on the open API spec.
Yeah, so there's new roles that didn't even exist when we started Redoc today. Today, so there's roles like API product manager, um, and so what we see is that companies have realized it doesn't take a person to bring an API program to maturity. It takes a team. So it's a team of people. There's usually a product manager, some developers involved, and a technical writer, sometimes developer advocate if this is a public-facing API, external APIs. So, and sometimes marketing. Uh, this team is all generally involved in this experience in various aspects of the API program. So technical writers are, I think, a very important part of API programs because APIs are quite technical, and they don't typically have user interfaces. So the docs is almost like the product of the API. So it's the box that you look at, and even when you unbox it, there's still more docs there, and that's what um, people are buying when it comes to APIs. Yes, the actual API service needs to work and be functional, but in order to get to the point where you even can find out if it works or is functional, you have to go through an onboarding process to understand, is this the right API? Is it going to do what I expect it to do? And um, will we be able to integrate it into our product, or whoever's consuming this API? Will it meet their use case?
So all these roles that you were describing, can they all sort of collaborate on content development within the Redocly system? Is this like a space? This is because this is like a perennial problem that I think a lot of tool vendors kind of struggle with. They want to make it very simple so that like anybody can author, but at the same time you want to have a robust tool set that allows for a lot of more advanced authoring needs. How does kind of how do you cater to both of those skill sets?
Yeah, so that's a big question, and that's a difficult question, and that's kind of led us to where we are going, which is we are in the process of building a new product, and it's actually a whole new product suite. It's different from uh, our existing product suite. It kind of was sparked from two things. There was the catalyst, which is we were not happy with our developer portal product. We weren't happy at the rate that we were able to add new features to it, and we had chosen an initial architecture which wasn't the best architecture for it. So we had made a decision to rebuild the developer portal from the core. So we were not going to use third-party libraries for the most part, and we were rewriting it from the core. And we completed that project this last year, but as we were looking at it and understanding the user experience and the different personas we work with, you've got the developer portal itself, which is serving a consumer, but then you have the producers of the developer portal, which might be the API product manager, technical writer, developer advocate. Then you have developers as well, who might be the builders, which is another persona. And each of them have, what uh, kind of what experience is our portal optimizing? And it's really optimizing that consumer experience. So we looked at, is there something we could do that we couldn't do before with the producer experience and the builder experience that we can do now, given that we have a new core that we've built from the ground up? And that very question is kind of sparked a series of innovation at our company, where we've literally paused work on our existing products. And for the past 6 months, we've been doing innovation to learn primarily, where we are building new, or not building, building's the wrong word. We're making prototypes and using them to learn more about how we can do better innovation to improve that producer experience, which is something that we've decided has become something that, again, just like Redoc and Redocly, I was reluctant. I didn't want to do this, but I felt there was no other option. I feel like this is exactly what's happened again with the producer experience. I just don't see a solution that is working for people that have robust needs that you can satisfy with docs-like code, but have a more accessible user experience to people who don't know anything about code, perhaps.
Wow. Wow, that's kind of interesting. Like, so you're really trying to solve this problem and you're developing and you're researching and you're investigating, doing prototypes on different models. You mentioned before we started a kind of like a product roadmap with some developments coming. Is that what you're alluding to?
Yeah, it is. At least, some of what I share is the original promise of, like, that first day that I learned about, it was called Swagger at the time. The first day that I learned about that, I was intrigued, but it wasn't really until we wrote our Swagger definition and fired up the tools and it wasn't working for me. And we found a consultant uh, who ended up telling us we did it right and the tools didn't support it. But I had a 4-hour long conversation where it was one of those conversations where everything just kind of clicks into place and you're like, oh, this one thing is going to power all of these things and it's going to unify everything. And for at least a few hours the whole world made sense. And then to realize that that was more hype than reality, a lot more hype than reality. Now, 8 years later, it's still more hype than reality. And I feel like this has to change. So that's like, that's really probably the prime motivator for this series of innovations. And yes, our product is going to speak to uh, that issue.
You started Redocly back in 2018, was it?
Yeah, so we started, so Redoc started in 2015,
Yeah.
and then in 2017 we incorporated, and we launched our a self-serve product in 2020. So yeah.
Okay. Well, you've been kind of thriving in this API tool space for a while, and I'm just wondering, what do you think is bringing people, new users to Redocly, when they're looking for API tools? Like, what problems are they trying to solve that basically Redocly does for them?
Yeah, so it's it's the issue. So why are we growing? It's not because we're good at sales and marketing, because we're not. We actually don't have any buddy on our team who does sales and marketing today. So we're still really a product oriented company. And what brings people to us um, is that we're building a product that is in the area. So it's the starving crowd phenomenon. So if you I think there was this story about a business school professor who um, who told his class, oh, if you had a hot dog stand and you could only have one advantage, what would that be? And the class was discussing lowest price, best tasting hot dog, best buns, whatever, best location. And at the end, the professor said, oh, it's a starving crowd, right? And that's, I think, the thing that's bringing people to us is that this is a problem that is unsolved, and it's a real problem, that affects a significant amount of people. So we're seeing a lot of growth because of that. I think, of course, I have a strong belief in APIs. Uh, we are using APIs right now, recording this podcast, and even though we're not integrating APIs, we're not understanding the contract of these APIs, but we're the benefactors of my browser, which is sending API requests and streaming my video and audio to a service that's being recorded as well, which is using APIs to, store this on a disk somewhere. And this is uh, just a reality that every day people are using APIs. They're ubiquitous, and they're going to continue to grow. But in terms of who can use APIs is not ubiquitous. And that's become our mission, to accelerate API ubiquity.
Yeah, I like the whole starving crowd analogy for sure. I mean, and I certainly agree that like APIs have continued to grow and accelerate. I've watched the traffic on my website, and the main reason people come is for information related to APIs and API documentation. It's kind of it's a little bit astounding to me, the sustained interest, and even at my work, I continue to see an emphasis on APIs and giving people the tools to build what they want through these APIs. And API documentation continues to be super varied. Uh, I was a couple years ago, or maybe 1 year ago, I was a judge on these Dev Portal Awards by Pronovix, where we would kind of like, I don't know, rank the best developer portals that had been submitted into this contest. And there were like 85 or so that we were looking at, and it was kind of really interesting. I think that I saw a lot of Redocly based APIs because I mean, there's kind of unique look and feel to some of them that I thought was Redocly. Do you have a few like public examples that you think, or that you point people to when they want an example of like, hey, show me some good API documentation. Show me like a company using Redocly in a cool way.
Yeah. So we've got a couple, and we have a like a customer story. We This last year we actually built a customer stories section on our website, which is a pretty big a challenge, considering we have no sales and marketing people. But that allows us to showcase some of our customers. It's always uh, fun to do that and learn about how our product has an impact. So one of those is Australia Post. It's the Australian Post Office, and they have a very complex suite of APIs, a product catalog of APIs, but they expose a few to the public. So you can go without having to log in or sign up for anything and browse a little bit of the catalog. But they have a lot of complexity in that you could sign up. If you were a partner, you might see a certain set of APIs. And if you're internal, you might see a different set of APIs. So they also have an onboarding experience, which to me is the developer can register, create credentials, and start using the API. And most people don't have that, and I really like that they have this in their developer portal. That's powered by us. So
That's cool.
yeah.
My cat is taking over here. Usually never comes up here, and all of a sudden can't get her off. Okay, come on, kitty cat. Come down. Okay, sorry. Um, that's pretty cool. That the ability to really like try out APIs and have like an onboarding experience right there to experiment with them has always been the fun part of API documentation that I've enjoyed. And definitely like making the experience interactive so that somebody can see what information you get back, how you can tweak it with parameters and kind of play around with it. It's always been like something that made API documentation unique and different from traditional forms of documentation that are just like instructions that you follow and do elsewhere.
Mhm.
So yeah, I love that. I'll check that out, and I'll include a link to that and any others. You mentioned the store that you have on your site. I'll link to that as well. It's kind of fascinating that you said you're a very product oriented company. You don't really have a lot of you don't have sales and marketing functions. I'm kind of curious about that. Like you're an entrepreneur, so you kind of like are very focused on the product. Is your philosophy that like if you have a great product that people will just naturally come to it because there's a starving kind of need for that product?
Well, I'm not that naive, but I do really believe that the key to building a good business is in the value creation process, and that value comes from a few things. I do think sales and marketing is quite important because you need to be able to communicate what you do. Uh, so I think we can improve at that quite a bit, but um, there is kind of like uh, uh, I guess you've got a spectrum, and you on one side of the spectrum you have self-serve, right? People self-serving, and you can make a parallel analogy to API documentation. There was a time when if you wanted to integrate another company's APIs, you'd have to have a phone call, and you'd set up a phone call, you'd talk with someone at the other end, and they would ask you, what do you want to do and why do you want to do it? And eventually they might send you through like a sample request. Okay, you do this, or a sample bit of code. Here's the code that will do what you're asking for. No documentation, and you're going back and forth with a human, and that of course is not very cost effective, and it's also really limiting because it repels a lot of people. Every time you want to learn something, oh, I have to talk to a human. That means a human has to pick up the phone. If they don't, then you've got scheduling issues, all kinds of problems. So documentation is doing the job that uh, the sales engineers and support engineers uh, uh, do as well. So I'm not suggesting that documentation replaces sales engineers and support engineers. Uh, but I'm also suggesting that you shouldn't have sales engineers and support engineers replace having documentation either. So, and in the same way, I think when it comes to building a company, why are we so focused on the product right now as opposed to the sales and marketing? Is because the most important aspect of sales and marketing is that starving crowd, finding that market and understanding them. So we're less focused on competitor insights at our company. We don't pay that close attention to competitors. We see a lot of competitors coming and signing up and secret browsing our products, but we don't spend too much time doing any of that. We spend our time on what I would call customer insights, talking to customers or prospects, understanding what they're looking for, what they're trying to accomplish, and asking them to make a series of choices, like
Hmm.
different trade-offs. Would you rather have A or B? And this help us form our view of the world. And we do think if we can build a better product that delivers superior value, uh, we will benefit from word of mouth marketing and allow us to accomplish the same sort of reach as a company that has earmarked $100 million of venture capital for doing a big go-to-market push.
That seems like a genuine insight, this kind of paying close attention to customers and what they want and giving them different options and hearing their trade-offs. Is that like an insight you've always had as a entrepreneur developing products and so on, or is this something you've learned since starting Redocly? Like, I'm just kind of curious. Was there any like new insights you've had being in this space for the last 5 years in developing API tools?
Yeah. I'm a learning machine. I don't think I know that much yet. So there's always more that I need to learn and understand. I think being able to keep an open mind is important when you're trying to understand a market and what they need. So these are new things that I've learned while at Redocly. And there's a lot that I've learned while at Redocly. But in terms of just how to do innovation, like we had to totally change the way we think in order to do innovation, because what is the way you think when you're building a product or okay, if you need to build a new feature, you want to understand the outcome, the exact outcome, and then you want to probably write some tests for it if you're doing a test-driven approach, or if you're doing a test in parallel, and you probably want to write documentation. Sometimes we also do documentation first. And if you take this approach to innovation, you end up over engineering in when you're really, the outcome is not what you thought it was. It's not to build this thing, it's to learn. So when we finally realized that we need to let go of writing tests and even having things be functional, and just take the approach of what can we do with how can we increase our time to learning and put this in a loop so that we can keep learning with uh, product innovation, so that way when the time comes we can build it right, and we
That's
can switch modes and go back to our the mode that everyone is most comfortable in our company at least, is we're going to write a lot of tests, we're going to have it's going to have a high test coverage, it's going to be robust, and but you want the opposite when you're doing innovation. It shouldn't be robust, it should be based on speed of learning.
I like that. I like that. I mean, definitely like with it seems as if things in the technology space are changing so fast that we do have to have an open mind and constantly learn at an accelerated speed. So it seems like that's a essential characteristic to sort of thrive and adapt in this constantly changing landscape that we're in. Well, Adam, if people want to find out more about Redocly, where would you send them on the web here?
Yeah, they could go to redocly.com, redocly.com. Hopefully, we're not too hard to find. And, uh, they could also sign up for my newsletter called API Wisdom, which, hopefully I can share more of my personal thoughts about the journey that we're on. And it's less about probably wisdom, but more about the experience and the journey. So yeah, that's probably what I would recommend.
Great, great. Well, I'll include links to both of those, both the newsletter, the site, and other resources in the show notes here. Thanks so much for doing this podcast. I really appreciate it.
Thanks, Tom. Appreciate it.